Hello, everyone, and welcome into the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. I'm Aaron Motes. On today's episode, the Yuuzhan Vong continue to overrun the planets in the Outer Rim, and they're about to turn their sights to the center of the galaxy. But the Jedi are about to discover something that could stop the Vong in their tracks. We'll find out what that secret is today in Dark Tide 2, Ruin, by Michael A. Stackpole, the conclusion of the Dark Tide duology. And talking about the book with me today is Matt Thacker, one of the hosts of the Davos Fingers podcast. Thank you for coming on the show today, Matt.
Thanks for having me, Aaron. This is my favorite Star Wars podcast, and it's a thrill for me to be on it with you.
Now, longtime listeners of the Star Wars Legends Lounge will remember that Matt was here a little over a year ago for my first listener question show, and that went pretty great. So, of course, I had to ask him back on to talk about the new Jedi Order. Now, you read the series before, haven't you, Matt?
I have, but it's been many moons, so much so that as I'm reading it now, there is a lot that it feels new to me, but I'm excited to re-explore it.
And thanks again for joining me to talk about today's book. We'll get to that in just a few minutes, but first, it's listener question time. We've got 3 questions today. The first comes from Preston Coy. Preston says, "Hello, I have 2 questions. First, what is the population of Rancors, and what is their homeworld? Second, do you think we could be introduced to new lightsaber colors in canon, such as teal, brown, etc.? Thank you for the great podcast." Well, thank you for the email, Preston. Rancors are native to the planet Dathomir. We don't know their exact population, but they're numerous enough that some of them were semi-domesticated by the Dathomiri witches, and that's in both Legends and canon. According to Wikipedia, there's also a subspecies of Rancors called jungle Rancors that are a little smaller and have a shell. They can be found on the planet Felucia. As to your second question, it looks like we may get another lightsaber color in the live-action Ahsoka show. In the teaser for that show, we see 2 lightsabers that definitely have an orange tint to them. And personally, I would like to see more lightsaber colors come into canon. How about you, Matt? What do you want to see when it comes to lightsaber colors?
Oh, I'm all about the colors. Let's paint with all the colors of the wind. Let's taste the rainbow. Any and all lightsaber colors are welcome in my world. It's been, I think it was in The Mandalorian, right? We saw Ahsoka with her whiter lightsaber blades, or kind of silvery. Of course, Rey with her yellow. So I feel like we're starting to see a few more colors come in. But I'm all about moving on beyond the blue, the green, and the red.
I want to see a lot more colors too. Well, thank you for the email, Preston. Today's second email comes from Jacob, who says, "Hello, my name is Jacob, and I'm 9 years old. Thank you for the show. I didn't know much about Star Wars Legends before your show, but it has really helped me to like it. My question is, what are the main parts of a lightsaber hilt in Legends?" Well, thank you very much for the email, Jacob, and thank you for the very kind words. I'm really happy you're enjoying the Legends stories, and I hope that continues. Matt, let's help Jacob out a little bit. What are the parts of a lightsaber hilt?
Well, Jacob, let me tell you that I've got a 10-year-old, and he's never asked about what parts make up a lightsaber hilt. So I think that's pretty cool that we can talk with you about it. According to the official page on StarWars.com, a lightsaber hilt consists of a crystal, a power cell, a focusing ring, a blade emitter, and then other various controls. The power cell provides the power for the blade. The focusing ring works with the power cell and the crystal to produce the blade. And the blade emitter is where the blade shoots out of. Finally, a Jedi, they can put different controls on the hilt to turn the lightsaber on and off or to change its length. The only difference in lightsaber hilts between canon and Legends is the crystal. In canon, the Jedi use kyber crystals in their lightsabers. In Legends, the Jedi can use different kinds of crystals. It's the reason why there are more lightsaber colors in Legends than there are in canon, like we said before, to this point.
Thank you very much again for the email, Jacob. And Jacob, if you have any questions about which legend stories you might want to try out, send me an email anytime. I can give you some suggestions. Today's third email comes from Charlie, who says, Yoda tells Luke that he will be the last Jedi, even though we have characters like Ahsoka Tano, Ezra Bridger, and others who survived the Purge. Is there a canon or legends explanation for this? Or is this just because George Lucas didn't yet plan the prequels and didn't think everything through? Well, Charlie, I think, honestly, you hit the nail right on the head. At the time of the original trilogy, Luke was the last Jedi. I doubt that Ahsoka Tano or Ezra Bridger or anyone else were even ideas back then. But, as I like to do on this show, let's think a little differently. If we were to assume that George Lucas had the entire saga planned out in the late 70s, then whether Luke was the last Jedi at that time of Yoda's death could depend on your point of view. Ahsoka didn't consider herself to be a Jedi because she had left the Order. Ezra Bridger was lost in the unknown regions, and others like Grogu or Gunji or Quinlan Vos were either missing or they were in hiding. Maybe Yoda didn't mean that Luke was literally the last Jedi, but that he was the only Jedi left to defeat Darth Vader and the Emperor. Matt, you have any thoughts on Charlie's question?
I agree with you and with some of the points that Charlie made as well. If we're talking technicalities here, as you mentioned, Ahsoka left the Jedi Order, and Ezra, who was out in the unknown regions anyway, was trained by Kanan Jarrus, who, I hate to say it, but he technically wasn't granted the title of Jedi Knight either, right? He was a Padawan at the time of Order 66. Now, I don't even think that Yoda would care much about those technicalities at this point, but there they are, if we're being real technical. I also don't know if we have any proof that Jedi, even one as powerful as Yoda, has an all-access pass across the universe to know about every single Jedi who is still alive. Should we expect him to know? I don't know if we should. There are certainly instances where Jedi can sense other Jedi, especially with those with whom they have a strong bond. But to know of every single Jedi in the universe, I kind of doubt it. So I wonder if Yoda just maybe didn't know about some of these other ones. He couldn't sense them maybe. And he doesn't always get things right. Remember the whole Sith Lord living under his nose for years and years, A huge swing and a miss by Yoda there. I'm kidding. Hindsight is kind of 20/20. It's hard to judge him. But it may just be that Yoda simply didn't know.
Thank you for the email, Charlie. Now, listener, if you have a question or comment for the show, like Preston, Jacob, or Charlie, send me an email at swlegendslounge@gmail.com or send me a tweet at legendslounge1. And if you'd like to get your voice on the show, feel free to record an audio question and email it in. Just please help me out and record it in MP3 or MP4 audio format. All right, Matt, Dark Tide 2, Ruin by Michael A. Stackpole. Are you ready?
Red 2 standing by.
Grab yourself a drink, and let's head in to the Star Wars Legends Lounge.
To begin, the Yuuzhan Vong continue their push through the Outer Rim, led by Commander Shadao Shai, fulfilling the prophecy of the Vong priest that this galaxy will be their new home. A few things about Shadao Shai. First, his grandfather, Monge Shai, was part of the first advance team to enter the galaxy 50 years ago and died on the planet Bimiel. Second, Shadao Shai wants his grandfather's body back, and he vows to kill the man who took it, one of the heretical Jedi, specifically Corran Horn. And finally, this guy, Shadao Shai, he loves pain. He embraces it. He finds salvation in it. And he's anxious to inflict this truth upon the inhabitants of the galaxy.
Meanwhile, Leia Organa Solo, Admiral Trace Crefet, and General Wedge Antilles are doing all they can to learn about the Yuuzhan Vong and to stop their advance through the Outer Rim. But they find themselves blocked by the New Republic government and Chief of State Borsk Falia. It's in one of these meetings that two missions are revealed. Leia will go to Bastion to enlist the help of the Imperial Remnant, led by Gilad Pellaeon. And Senator Eligos Akla, the loyal Kamasi friend of Leia, tasks himself with going as an emissary to Shadao Shai to attempt negotiations. The Kamasi are pacifists, and Eligos vows to do everything he can to halt the Vong invasion and stop a full-scale war before it starts.
On Yavin 4, Luke Skywalker and his still ailing wife Mara Jade meet with the Jedi to address the growing division in the Order. One side, led by Kip Duron, believes the only way to fight the violence of the Vong is with a concerted, violent offensive of their own. Luke, along with Mara, Corran, and others, advocate for a more thoughtful approach that does not skirt so close to the dark side. Luke announces that the New Republic government, whatever side they pick, will not sanction the Jedi's participation in military action. He says their primary task will be to protect refugees from the Vong-conquered worlds as they travel coreward, much to the dismay of Kip's faction. However, Luke does announce that Corran has been called back into military service. Acting as a colonel in the New Republic military, Corran and a squad of Nogri will infiltrate the Vong-controlled world of Garki to try to learn more about their motivations, strength, and resources. Luke assigns Jedi Ganner Rhysode and Jason Solo to go with Corran and act as civilian observers.
On the capital of the Imperial Remnant, the planet Bastion, Leia and Danny Kui meet with Grand Admiral Pellaeon and a council of Moffs. Many in the Imperials are wary of the New Republic baiting them into a trap, but Pellaeon recognizes the threat the Yuuzhan Vong poses. He chastises the Imperials, who advise staying out of the fight, hoping to take advantage of the coming war and to take back some of the territory that they lost. But Pellaeon refuses, asking the Moffs what they think will happen to them if the Vong destroys the New Republic. The Vong will wipe the Imperial Remnant off the galactic map. Pellaeon tells Leia the Imperial military will defend the Remnant first, but he commits to helping the New Republic as they are able.
Luke, Mara, and Anakin discover that Deshara Kor, a Twi'lek Jedi who follows Kip Duron, has disappeared. Anakin uncovers evidence that she accessed information on superweapons, the Death Star, the Sun Crusher, the Eye of Palpatine, the Darksaber, and even more. Enlisting the help of Chalko, a petty information broker, the three Jedi rush off to stop Deshara Kor. She makes it to the Vortex, even meeting with former Imperial weapons designer Kui Zooks, the woman who helped design the Death Star and the Sun Crusher, before Luke and company track her down to Garros 4. There, they split up. Anakin is captured by Deshara Kor, but he's rescued by Chalko. The incident awakens Deshara Kor to her sense of duty to the Jedi and her commitment to following Luke.
Meanwhile, Eligos Akla arrives at Dubrillion, where the Vong forces are staged, and requests to meet with Shadao Shai. The Yuuzhan Vong commander is intrigued and invites the Ka'amasi onto his command ship, the Legacy of Torment. The two begin to teach, learn, and understand each other better. But to fully understand the Yuuzhan Vong, Shadao Shai tells Eligos he must fully commit to one of their most sacred rituals. Eligos agrees, telling the commander he'll do whatever is necessary to stop the war. Come then, Shadao Shai says. Allow me to introduce you to the embrace of pain.
Ooh. Well, Corran and his team infiltrate Garki and meet up with a local resistance force. They learn that the Vong are using coral implants to create an army of human slaves. Corran's team sets out to obtain samples of the Vong biotech, which they can hopefully analyze to find an inoculation. They're discovered, however, and a battle ensues. The Vong surround Corran's group, trapping them in the Ithorian section of a xenobotanical garden. Escape looks impossible for our heroes, when suddenly the Vondoon crab armor the Vong are wearing begins to swell, crushing the warriors inside. Strange, Corran thinks, but unbelievably lucky. The armor must have had a severe allergic reaction to the pollen from Ithorian bafford trees in the garden. Corran has his squad take samples of the pollen and armor, and then orders the garden burned to hide the evidence from the Vong.
Admiral Crefray arrives at Garki in the Rallroost to extract Corran's strike team. He finds a Yuuzhan Vong battle group orbiting the planet. Crefray orders Rogue Squadron to protect the strike team's shuttle, while the Rallroost tries to hold off the larger Vong warships. The Rogues perfected their tactics of overwhelming the Coral Skipper's Dovin Basals using low-energy laser blasts and detonating their proton torpedoes early before taking kill shots. But the battle looks bleak. The sheer number of enemy forces is too much, until, out of nowhere, the Empire arrives. Grand Admiral Pelion and an Imperial battle group jump to the rescue of the New Republic forces. The Rogues are saved by a squadron of expert starfighters who claim to be part of a Chiss House phalanx loaned to the Empire by General Baron Soontir Fel and led by his son, a human, Jagged Fel. The Imperials escort the Rogues and Corran's shuttle back to the Rallroost and cover their escape.
In the weeks following the battle above Garki, New Republic and Imperial remnant leadership gather at Ithor to plan its defense, knowing it's only a matter of time before the Yuuzhan Vong learn about the bafford trees and effect the pollen has on Vong biotechnology. However, the Ithorians hold a high respect for nature, and they refuse to synthesize a natural botanical into a weapon used for harm. Stepping foot on Ithor is not even allowed unless one is blessed by Ithorian priests and agrees to observe certain restrictions. So, while New Republic, Imperial, and Ithorian leaders meet on the floating Ithorian headship Tefanda Bay, the Jedi meet in one of its groves. There, they are instructed by Ithorian priest Rilal Turan on what they must do to spiritually prepare to step foot on Ithor, a ceremony that includes each Jedi publicly renouncing that which they feel holds them back. Noticeable is Deshara Kor, penitent after her renegade mission and subsequent capture by Anakin, who renounces hatred. Ganner Rhysode, left humbled at Garki with a deep, hideous scar now running his face, renounces pride. Luke, responsibility. Corran, fear. Anakin, self-assuredness. And Jason, the need to know what will happen in the future.
Back on the Legacy of Torment, Dane Lian, Shadao Shai's second-in-command, reports his findings about the Ithorian bafford trees and the pollen. Shai commands Lian to plan an attack on Ithor to commence in 1 month, but to do it in a way that does not destroy the planet. Lian agrees and slinks away to his cabin, where he pulls out a hidden Villip and reports all that has occurred to a yet unnamed master, someone much higher than Shadao Shai in the chain of command. The master mocks Shai's plan as weak, but tells Lian to proceed as ordered, making Shadao Shai to look like a fool. Lian tells the master he will obey and closes the Villip. Lian smiles, knowing that he is one step closer to the high position that he believes should be his.
Shadao Shai has set other plans in motion, sending a gift to the New Republic, specifically to Corran Horn, Elegos Akla's shuttle, and within, the bones of Elegos himself. With the ornately adorned and arranged bones is a Villip of Shadao Shai. Through the Villip, Shadao reveals that he's a descendant of Mongay Shai, whose remains were found on Bimiel, and he is kin of the 2 warriors Corran later killed. He confesses that it was vengeance for these acts that led Shadao Shai to kill Elegos with his own 2 hands, and he demands that Mongay Shai's remains be returned to him when their forces meet over Ithor. Corran, horrified, starts to feel for himself the itch of vengeance.
On the Tefanda Bay, Luke, Pelion, and Crefray prepare for the Vong attack. they've done better than expected evacuating the planet, but they still need more time. Corran then comes up with a plan. Shadao Shai wants him just as much as he wants his grandfather's remains, and Corran says they can use that to their advantage. He says he'll challenge Shadao Shai to a duel. If Shai wins, he gets the bones of his kin back. If Corran wins, the attack on Ithor is called off. Corran says he'll propose the duel to happen in 2 weeks, which should give Crefray and Pelion time to evacuate the rest of the planet. Luke is wary of the plan, telling Corran he is skirting dangerously close to the dark side. But reluctantly, the 3 leaders agree.
Yeah, and the battle is joined at Ithor, and amidst the mounting New Republic casualties are 2 notables. Jaina's friend and wingmate, Annie Capstan, is killed in a dogfight above the planet, and Deshara Kor succumbs to the venom from a Yuuzhan Vong amphistaff while fighting Vong warriors and their reptoid Chazrak soldiers on the Tafanda Bay alongside Anakin. But our heroes find success as well. Yuuzhan Vong forces led by Shadao Shai find what appears to be a well-fortified structure on Ithor defended by droids. Fueled by their hatred of all things autonomic, the Vong forces go berserk, only to quickly discover it's a trap. It's a trap! Shadao Shai is barely able to escape before the building explodes, killing dozens of Vong warriors. Following the blast, Shadao Shai's communication Villip transforms into the face of Corran Horn. Corran challenges Shadao Shai to the aforementioned duel. The Yuuzhan Vong commander agrees to a week-long truce in order to prepare. And so for now, the fighting's over.
1 week later, Corran, with Luke as his second, and Shadao Shai, with Dane Lian as his second, meet on the planet's surface. The fighters appear equally matched at first, and the battle is fierce. But without the ability to sense Shadao Shai in the Force, Corran knows it's only a matter of time before he falls to the younger, stronger alien. Corran begins to tire, and Shadao Shai presses his advantage. He parries a lightsaber slice and stabs Corran in the gut with his amphistaff. Corran falls at the Vong commander's feet. Shadao Shai raises his amphistaff to deliver the final blow when Corran turns off his lightsaber and lunges forward inside the amphistaff strike. Caught off balance, Shadao Shai stumbles forward a step as Corran brings the hilt of his lightsaber to meet the Vong's stomach. Corran ignites his saber, and the silver blade emerges from out Shadao Shai's back. The Vong commander dies, ending the duel. Luke quickly pulls Corran out from under Shadao Shai's body, while Dane Lian flees back to his ship to take command of the fleet. But Lian does not abide by the terms of the duel and releases a toxic slime all over Ithor, killing all life on the planet. Nothing survives. Ithor is dead. Lian reports his victory to his master, War Master Savon Law, who congratulates him and affirms his command of Shadao Shai's fleet. But his command is short-lived, as the Legacy of Torment is caught by a New Republic interdictor cruiser, which overwhelms the Torment's Dovin Basals. With the Torment unable to escape, the New Republic and Imperial fleet fire at will, destroying the Torment in a glorious blaze. But the success is bittersweet, as the loss of Ithor erases any joy of victory.
The story ends a week later. Corran, fresh out of Bacta treatments, is devastated by the news of Ithor, and learns Borsk Phalia is blaming him for the planet's destruction. If Luke repudiates Corran, distancing the Jedi Order from him, they could escape further recrimination and could continue in their efforts to help the galaxy. Horn can shoulder the burden, even feeling as if he partially deserves it, admitting how closely he flirted with the dark side during his duel with Shadao Shai. It takes some convincing, but eventually Luke agrees. Jason, however, does not.
Time for a break. When we return, Matt and I will talk more about Dark Tide 2 Ruin, the second book in the Dark Tide duology. I'm Aaron Moats. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. Thank you for listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge, where we celebrate the books from Star Wars Legends. But let me take a moment and recommend a book from Star Wars canon. Aftermath, Life Debt continues the story of Nora Wexley's group chasing Imperial Admiral Ray Sloane, while Han Solo vows to liberate Chewbacca's home world. Han enlists Nora, her son Snap, Jom, Jap, and Sinjir for help. Can our heroes fight off the Empire and free Kashyyyk? Find out in Aftermath, Life Debt by Chuck Wendig, the second book in the Aftermath trilogy. Welcome back to the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. I'm Aaron Moats, and today, Matt and I are wrapping up the Dark Tide duology with Dark Tide 2, Ruin, by Michael A. Stackpole, the third book in the new Jedi Order series. Things are starting to get serious now, Matt. We've now had, 4 planets completely destroyed?
Wow. Yeah.
Either by just the Vong or the fighting between the New Republic and the Vong.
Mm-hmm.
It's starting to really get hairy for the New Republic because you had Helska 4, you had Dubrillion, you had Serpendal. Those were either sparsely populated planets or, in the case of Helska 4, not even populated at all.
Right.
Now, you've started moving from the outer rim to the edges of the mid-rim, and you've taken out Ithor. This is an important planet. Now, things are really starting to get serious for the New Republic.
And it's not even a matter of let's take over the planet just so we can control it and use it as a base of operations for moving more coreward. This is just like, we're destroying this planet just to destroy it. This is not just some, conquest or use the planet for our own needs or whatever. This is to kill just to kill. And so those stakes go up even more for, that Vong threat.
One thing we didn't go over in this book during our summary, Serpendal, the planet that was destroyed back in Vector Prime, where Chewbacca saved Anakin's life. The rogues perform a reconnaissance mission to Serpendal, and they discover something. Inside of all that destruction, the Vong have started to build something. We don't know exactly what yet, but they're building something big. So while they can't do that now with Ithor, they are doing something to some of these planets that they have taken over.
Yeah, so it's not, you're totally right. So it's not even a matter of just saving lives. That's already reason enough. And now we have this interesting situation where we're transferring refugees from all these different planets to even more different planets, and it's becoming a logistical issue too. But it's actually becoming, there's more pressure on them, on the New Republic, to act now to stop whatever is being built. Because the Yuuzhan Vong are already strong enough, and if they're adding to those forces and adding to that power, then we've got an even more dire situation.
And that's considering the fact that maybe a quarter to a third of the Vong forces are here right now. I mean, we had the Praetor at Vong in the first book.
Yeah.
That was basically almost like a reconnaissance mission in itself. You have Shadao Shai's forces. That's basically just the vanguard.
Mm-hmm.
The main force of the Yuuzhan Vong invasion hasn't even gotten to the galaxy yet. The New Republic and the Imperial Remnant, they really don't know what is about to happen.
They really don't. And that makes us as readers even more intrigued and more scared. And it makes you wonder, what can they do? The New Republic is barely holding on right now against a force that's just a small taste of what's really out there.
So Matt, you said at the beginning of the show, you have read these books before, but it's been quite a while. So it's almost like reading it all over again.
It really is. Yeah.
What did you like about this book, and were there any things in this book that didn't work for you?
with Stackpole, I'm a big fan of the X-Wing books. You know this, Aaron. And that was kind of Stackpole's entrance into the Star Wars universe. So I love him, and I love the pacing with which he writes. When I finished the book, I was seriously surprised. I was reading it on an e-reader, so I didn't have the pages to actually tell me I was almost done with the book. And I was surprised when I finished. I was like, already it's done? Oh, it was such a fast read for me. And so well paced. I loved all of the different action sequences that we have. On a smaller note, one of the things I really liked about this book was the relationship between the Imperial Remnant and the New Republic. I thought it worked rather well. I might give some caveats to that and the stuff I didn't love, but for the most part, I really liked it, and I really liked the relationship we saw develop between Crefet and Pelion. Just a warm, mutual respect for each other that I thought worked really well. So I loved seeing all of these different sides coming together in Dark Tide and in the New Jedi Order as a whole, and those are some of the things I really liked. What about you?
I enjoy Stackpole's writing for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
I believe my favorite part is similar to yours. It's his pacing. He's one of my favorite when it comes to the battle scenes, because whether it's a space battle, whether it's a ground battle, things happen quickly, and he writes it quickly. He doesn't sit there and take an entire page to write something that occurs in only 5 or 10 seconds. If it happens quickly, it's a sentence, and then all of a sudden you're on to the next thing.
Good point.
That's what I like about Stackpole's writing. If I had a criticism, I had mentioned on one of the previous episodes of the show, one of the things about the Vong is their worship of pain and death. This is really the first book where we start to see that in the scenes specifically between Shadao Shai and Elegos Akla. Shadao Shai puts Elegos through basically torture for no other reason than to torture him. I know it's under the auspices of teaching Elegos about the Yuuzhan Vong, but it really isn't.
Nope.
It's just to torture Elegos, basically to see what the Ka'amase can put up with before he breaks.
Yeah. Pacifism is never a fair fight, right? And I suppose it's not meant to be, but
yeah, and some of those scenes do get fairly graphic.
For sure.
Particularly the embrace of pain scenes, where they talk about shoulders popping out of sockets, ligaments stretching to their breaking point.
Yeah.
That would be one thing that I think if I could go back to the meetings between all these authors in the late 90s when they came up with the Yuuzhan Vong, I would say maybe let's just make these scenes not as graphic as you are.
So it wasn't so much the idea behind kind of their sadistic nature, but more the graphic way that it's represented on page.
For me, yes.
Okay. That's fair.
I kind of agree at times with folks that don't think this is a tone that they like in the Star Wars universe.
That's fair. Yeah, it's very different. I mean, we've had scenes of torture in the Star Wars universe before, Han Solo and The Empire Strikes Back and Princess Leia in A New Hope, but it's all very, the door closes on the camera before the rough stuff starts.
It's very implied.
Yeah.
It's implied torture.
Right.
In Andor, you did have the one scene where the technician put the headphones on Bix Colleen.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
And she starts screaming, but you don't hear, as the audience member, what she is hearing.
Yeah, that's true.
Honestly, the most graphic scene of torture that's coming to mind right now from on screen is when 3PO and R2 get taken to the lower levels of Jabba's palace,
oh, the feet.
and you see the droid torture room.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. You see the one droid stretched out, getting his limbs torn off, and you see the box droid getting his feet heated up. Yeah, that's true. That's fair. That's very fair. For me, one criticism that I might have that doesn't land for me is a lot of Stackpole's dialogue. I think Stackpole is a great character builder, and I think he does a really good job of focusing on a lot of different characters. And he does it in a very fair way for the most part. Corran Horn's his little superhero, but we'll maybe talk more about that later. But the dialogue, the back and forth between two characters feels just like it's just a vehicle for saying what Corran needs to say to move the story along. So he puts it in to me, it comes off as very dry dialogue in many instances of this is said, now this is said, now this is said, now this is said, and now the story's moved forward and we can move on with another action sequence. So that's one thing that doesn't land super well for me with him. But for the most part, his character building and the stories that he tells are just fantastic.
You mentioned the dialogue. One of the criticisms, obviously, of the prequel films is the dialogue, specifically the romantic dialogue between Padme and Anakin. Mm-hmm. I noted 2 places in this book, and stupid old me, I wish I had the book in front of me so I could look them back up again and read it actually what it was. But there's 2 spots where Luke and Mara are talking to each other. Mm-hmm. And Mara uses the phrase husband mine like various times. I'm like, one, no one says that in a conversation. And 2, if you take these paragraphs, yes, the Padme Anakin dialogue may have been a bit stilted. This is right up there with anyone who wants to criticize Lucas for his romantic dialogue.
Yeah, there's some stuff, the Luke and Mara stuff, Corran and Mirax, there's a couple scenes too where you're just like, oh, come on.
No one says that to their significant other.
Totally agree, my friend. Totally agree. You asked about things that didn't quite work for me, and so that was one of them. And the other big thing for me just stems from the fact that originally this duology was meant to be 3 books, right? And Stackpole ended up, he disagreed with, to make a long story short, he disagreed with some of the direction that the publisher wanted to go, and so he ended up just doing it in 2 books. And I feel like you can kind of sense that throughout the book. There's a lot of quick turnarounds, and a couple of the quick turnarounds that didn't work for me were Deshara Cores and Ganner Rhysodes. It was just like they had an experience, Deshara Core was captured, and then the next time we see her, she's completely back on Luke's side, isn't feeling anything of what she felt before. Ganner Rhysodes burns a little more slowly. He has that really nice monologue to Jason after he gets his scar on his, or after he gets his cut on his face. But for both of them, they were both so far away in the other camp, kind of on Kip Duron's faction. And I'm a reader who loves to explore the heart in conflict with itself. I almost said human heart in conflict with itself, but Deshara Core isn't a human. So the heart in conflict with itself. I would have liked to see both characters struggle a bit more, or weighing ethical implications, or feeling some of that regret and working through those decisions a little bit more than we did. And some of the other things moved a little quickly too, but those were ones that stuck out to me.
I agree with you to a point. Ganner's works for me, but I completely agree with you with Deshara Cores, because after she's apprehended, there's like one notation in one of the chapters where Anakin is your POV that just says that Luke and Deshara Core have been meeting together.
Yeah.
It's like one sentence. And then later, Anakin's speaking with her, and she basically tells him, yes, I met with your uncle. Master Skywalker has taken me back. He has shown me the error of my ways. I'm all for Luke's way of envisioning what the Jedi Order is to do.
Yeah.
That is one of the scenes that I think you need to see in this book.
And I wonder if we would have if we'd had a 3rd book.
Sure, maybe we would have. But that one to me almost feels like Elaine Bennis from Seinfeld. They just yada yada'd over the best part.
Good point. Yep. Even with some of the Imperial Remnant and New Republic stuff, I would have loved to have seen opposition from the old school New Republic leaders, saying, we're going to work with the Imperial Remnant. These are the people that created the Death Star. And you do get a little bit of that, but I would have loved to see a little more back and forth there. I would have loved to see a little more, you just see the New Republic is now bad. New Republic leadership is bad, led by Borsk Phalia. And maybe I'd like to see a little Garm Bel Iblis or some of these guys that are challenging Borsk a little bit from the political perspective or the New Republic leadership perspective. I think we could have gotten those with another book. And because Stackpole had to wrap up a lot of this stuff, he kind of glazed over some of it. So
I do think we get some of that going forward, at least. Maybe not in this book, but we do get more of the conflict between the leadership of the New Republic and the Imperial Remnant going forward.
Good point. Yeah, we still have 16 more books left in this series. We got plenty of time.
Yeah, we've got quite a journey. You mentioned the scene earlier between Ganner Rysode and Jason Solo after they were part of Corrin's strike team that infiltrated Garki. There was a battle with some of the Yuuzhan Vong. Ganner gets his face sliced open along the left side. It goes all the way from the top of his forehead down to his chin. As they're escaping the planet, Jason goes to give Ganner a painkiller. Ganner refuses until he cauterizes his wound. Then he accepts the painkiller. What do you think of that scene, and do you think that scene will have any effect on Jason as we go forward?
I thought it was a powerful scene. I really liked it. I did criticize a little bit of Ganner's turnaround of it being so quick, but I thought that scene was really powerful. It reminded me of you listening to Davos Fingers. I bring a lot of song lyrics into stuff because I'm always listening to music. It brought to mind two lyrics for me, actually, just two quick liners. One from the Hold Steady, one of my favorite bands, who said, "You want the scars, but you don't want the war." And that kind of made me think of Ganner a little bit in the sense of he wanted that glory. He wanted something to be able to tell a story about of him conquering this great warrior. But the battle, that ended up not being great for him. And then a line from a Dave Matthews Band song. The song's called Beach Ball. And Dave says, "Give me scars to bring me grace." And, learn, in other words, learning from the things that scar us a little bit or the tough situations we go through. And I love that from Ganner. A powerful paragraph in that whole sequence was not what he said, but what happened. He said after he'd gotten his wound all cauterized by the Nogri, I can't remember the Nogri's name. It says he accepted a dressing soaked in disinfectant and swabbed it over the side of his face, clearing up the blood. Most of the red went away, save the angry line from forehead to jaw. The flesh on the line was clearly tender, but Ganner washed it thoroughly nonetheless. Symbolizing Ganner's, washing away that old way of thinking and committing to a new path and accepting the pain or discomfort that comes along with that. I imagine that really stung, rubbing that disinfectant on that fresh wound, but it was a way of cleansing himself and setting himself on a new course. He said at the end, "I didn't want it to be easier, Jason. I wanted it to be memorable." So Jason has a lot to learn from that. Jason's a thinker. He's very analytical. He likes to think through his positions. He's very philosophical. And what he's learning here from Ganner is that it's not going to be easy. You can't just think your way through some of these things. To get the scars, you're going to have to fight the war. To learn grace, you're going to have to maybe get some scars too, as Dave Matthews would put it. So I think he's going to learn a lot about having to get in there and do some of that rough stuff in order to achieve the outcome that you desire, which for Jason is very much harmony and peace and lack of violence. So that's what I pulled from it. What do you think?
Well, At the beginning of the Yuuzhan Vong invasion, amongst the Jedi, there was basically 4 schools of thought. You had the school represented by Kip Duran and his followers that in order to defend the galaxy, we have to go on the offensive against the Vong. Mm-hmm. You had Luke's school of thought that that's not what a Jedi does. Yes, I understand that's the way I was trained, but I found another way in the end to defeat Vader and Palpatine. I found that through compassion, I could defeat evil.
Yeah.
So you have those 2 schools of thought in conflict. Then you had Anakin, who basically was using the Force as a tool. Now, at this point, Anakin is the one that has sort of changed his point of view. He's now come over to Luke's side. The 4th was Jason's, and you said he is the most introspective. He's the most intellectual. He's the one that thinks the deepest. He's continually looking for the Jedi to be something more, but he can't define what that something more is. I think the scene between him and Ganner might start showing him that something more just might be looking outside of yourself. Mm-hmm. Ganner thought one way. Luke teamed Ganner up with Corran several times so that Ganner could learn another way. And it seems as though Ganner Rysode is now taking that to heart, that his way wasn't correct. Maybe by learning from some of the other Jedi who think differently from myself, I can learn to be something more. Hopefully that's what Jason takes from it.
I love that. Learning to be something more. It's like you don't have to completely change who you are, Ganner Rysode or Jason Solo, but you can learn something and build upon yourself and build upon the knowledge that you already have and evolve where you need to. I love that. Well thought out, man.
Matt, the last question I have for you is about Corran Horn. We talked about Stackpole. Corran is his OP. He loves the guy. At the end of the book, we end up with Corran going into exile. Why do you think Luke and the New Republic leadership allow Corran to take the blame for Ithor's destruction?
That's a really good question.
And Corran himself. Corran allows himself to take the blame. He tells Luke, "You have to put this on me."
Yeah. In the Song of Ice and Fire books that we cover on our podcast Davos Fingers, there's a moment where they're advocating killing a child in order to maybe save the lives of others, and one of the characters asks, "What is the life of one child?" And the other character answers with one word: everything. You think about that here with Corran. Well, what is the life of one, Jedi Knight / until now Colonel in the New Republic military? And you wonder, well, could it be everything? But that's what leaders have to do. They have to make hard decisions. And you do have to weigh, is this worth allowing him to do that in order to save face both on the New Republic front and on the Jedi front? I feel like it's an awfully big stretch for Phalia to blame Corran in the first place. You guys, well, at least all the military, agreed for Corran to go about with this little duel idea. But what was Corran supposed to do? He abided by the rules of the duel. He won the duel. So the fact that the Vong didn't play fair isn't exactly a fault that rests completely on Corran's shoulders, But I do think that the New Republic leadership is floundering right now. They don't know what to do. They're seeing that this is bigger than they ever thought. And to just keep moving forward without having the population of the galaxy at large completely turn on them, they need to be able to blame somebody. And Corran's taken that. And It is kind of sad that Luke comes around to it and Traced as well, but here we are.
That's the only part of that doesn't sit well with me, is that Luke agrees to it.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think Luke would do that, if I'm being honest. That doesn't feel like something Luke would do. Considering how many times Luke has shown the compassion to take fallen Jedi back.
Kip Duron, for example.
Even in this book, Deshara Kor takes her back to allow Corran to shoulder all the blame for the destruction of Ithor. Luke was there. The New Republic military was there. Borsk Valia himself was helping to crew the Raw Roost.
Mm-hmm.
They saw that it was the Yuuzhan Vong that deployed this biological weapon that destroyed the planet. If you want somebody to blame, you have an easy scapegoat out there. This is why we have to team up, because the Yuuzhan Vong are killing us.
Yeah. And they're ruthless. This is how Stackpole writes Luke. It's an interesting thing that I'm just starting to realize as I've been reading the expanded universe novels, more carefully over the past 2 or 3 years. I recently read Jedi, and I don't know how well you remember that one, Aaron, but Luke comes off as he's undergoing a lot of dissonance about the Jedi Order and his role in the Force. This is kind of where that starts. And of course, Corran Horn, he almost comes off as bumbling, and like Corran needs to set Luke straight throughout the book. And Corran is constantly like setting Luke straight. No, this is the way. And Luke's like, oh yeah, you're right, man. Oh gosh, I didn't even realize it, because Corran is Michael Stackpole's, guy. And you feel that in this book too, of Luke's trying to articulate the way that the Jedi should act, but he's still having trouble doing it. He's a little more confident than he is in Jedi, but still there's a little bit of uncertainty coming from Luke, a little bit of uncertainty of how to handle the Jedi Order. So you see that. The only thing I could think of as to your statement, which I agree with, of this doesn't feel like Luke, is maybe he feels like Corran needs this time away, and so he's allowing him to do it in order to give Corran that introspection time. But my response to my own suggestion there is, but why do you have to throw him under the bus in front of the whole galaxy to do that? So
yeah, you can just say he needs to go rest from being stabbed through the gut.
Yeah, he's going back to
and
Corelli
almost
to
dying.
Recover. Yeah. Ugh.
Well, Matt, I guess it's almost time to go. But first, I wanted to share a message that the show received about the Anakin-Padme romance that I was talking about with Thomas and Crystal of the TK331 podcast back when we had our listener question show in April. Based on what we see on screen in the prequels, the three of us did not understand what Padme saw in Anakin. Well, listener Joe Abelli has a theory about that. Matt, would you please read the message that Joe sent?
You bet. Joe says, "This is entirely headcanon, but it's my belief that Padme was never truly even in love with Anakin. We all know that Anakin was incredibly powerful with the Force and not very good at controlling his emotions. I believe that he unintentionally used the Force to manipulate Padme into loving him, which is why their relationship seems odd in the prequels and the Clone Wars TV show. I don't think he did it on purpose necessarily, but his wishing and hoping for her to love him could have somehow manifested those feelings. Perhaps Palpatine also had some sort of influence there. That could also make sense considering that Anakin's attachment to Padme was ultimately what pushed him to the dark side in the end."
Thank you for the email, Joe. I appreciate the theory, and I decided to forward it to Crystal and Thomas to get their thoughts. Crystal says, quote, "I've heard this theory before, but I disagree for two reasons. One, I think it would take someone much more powerful than Anakin or Palpatine, someone unreasonably powerful, universe-breaking powerful, to maintain that kind of intentional or unintentional control for so long. During the Clone Wars, Anakin and Padme are apart for long periods of time. I can't help but feel that the effect would diminish during those periods. 2, I don't love what this theory says about either Anakin or Padme. Even if it's unintentional on Anakin's part, it feels very manipulative, even abusive. From Padme's side, it makes her seem weak-willed. She certainly has flaws, and she clearly doesn't resist Anakin romantically, but I would rather it be her choice, even if it's a bad one, than to have that choice taken away from her." Unquote. Now Thomas says, quote, "In 1977, Obi-Wan Kenobi said that the Force can have a strong influence on the weak-minded. To me, Padme is anything but weak-minded, especially during Attack of the Clones. If Anakin or Palpatine was trying to force her to do something intentionally, I think they would just fail. And I don't see it happening unintentionally. Also, I agree with Crystal. It feels kind of icky." Unquote. Matt, do you have an opinion on the way the Anakin-Padme relationship is portrayed on screen and Joe's theory about it?
I'm completely in your corner of what does this wonderfully built character in Padme Amidala, who's so strong-willed and so confident and so self-possessed, what does she see in Anakin Skywalker? Oh my goodness. And a lot of that doesn't feel like it makes sense, especially in the way the dialogue is presented between the two of them, as we've talked about. But I agree with everything being said. I find it difficult to believe that the strong-willed Padme Amidala could be influenced in that way. I get what Joe's saying about Anakin maybe not doing it intentionally. And just someone of that ability being, manifesting the Force in a way that he doesn't even completely understand. But I agree with everything that was presented. I think that even if it wasn't written to my liking by George Lucas, I think that there was some real feelings to Padme for Anakin, and obviously that went where it did. But so I agree, in other words, with you.
Yeah. Joe, I just don't think that's the way the Force works. And I think it's more interesting in a story when the characters have agency. Even if I don't like the way the romance works, I think it's more interesting if it's Padme's choice to fall in love with Anakin. Just like I think it's more interesting that it was Anakin's own choices that led him to fall to the dark side, rather than just someone saying, well, Palpatine manipulated him, that's what caused him to fall. Because Anakin still had to make choices along the way. Thank you for sharing your headcanon with us, Joe. I love when people share their theories with us here on the show. And listener, if you disagree with anything that I say, or if you want to share your opinions, or if you have a question, you can send me an email. I'll read it on the show. The email address is swlegendslounge@gmail.com, or you can send a tweet at legendslounge1. Now it's time to wrap up, Matt. Thank you again for joining me today and for joining us on our journey through the new Jedi Order. If the listeners would like to check out the Davos Fingers podcast, or they would like to contact you, what's the best way to do that?
You can find Davos Fingers on Twitter at Davos Fingers. We're also on Facebook. If you would like to check out our Patreon content, you can look at patreon.com/DavosFingers. We'd love to have you along for the ride. You can also find the podcast itself on Apple Podcasts or kind of wherever you consume your podcasts. If you want to talk to me personally about whatever, my Twitter handle is at Thackalanche. That's T as in Tom, H-A-C-K, Alanche, like avalanche. And I'd love to chit-chat with you.
Coming up on the next episode, I'll be joined by my good friend K2, who, like two of the other co-hosts on this venture, Kat and Scott, is reading this series for the very first time. She and I will be discussing Agents of Chaos 1, Hero's Trial by James Luceno. You can look forward to that episode coming up on May 26th. Once again, thank you so much for listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. I'm Aaron Motes. May the Force be with you. And remember, there's always a bit of truth in legends.